Hello, and welcome to an annual tradition here at Upstream, the Maintainer State of the Union panel. We look forward to this panel every year because it's a chance to hear directly from maintainers themselves. My name is Amy Hayes, and I'm the Upstream Chair. I've helped plan Upstream over the past 4 years. I'll be joined as host by Kanish Sharma, who heads up our product and content marketing here at Tidelift. We'll be your co-hosts, and we'll tag team this session. Now, enough about us. Without further ado, I'd like to ask our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves. Who are you? What projects do you maintain? And how did you get started? I was thinking we would start with Wesley.
Sure. I'm Wesley Beary. Mostly worked in the Ruby ecosystem. So my biggest claims to fame, I guess, are what was the Fog library and is now sort of the Fog suite of libraries, which are API clients for different cloud things, right? So originally just AWS, but then it kind of grew into lots of things. There's lots of clouds now. There weren't at the time that I started, but there came to be. A lot of that was me just being interested in learning more about that stuff and that being a good way to do it. And there weren't really good clients around at the time. So there was a niche to fill. So I kind of got started there. And then being, the young naive developer that I was, one of the things that I did as part of that was to actually develop basically a socket level HTTP library, because some of the things in Ruby that were available to do that for my client weren't what I wanted. And that eventually became extracted to become the excon library, which has now also been very successful in its own right. So yeah, those are the two main ones. I've been doing those for, actually, my first commit I looked the other day was just about 15 years ago. So it's been quite a while now. So
Congrats. That's awesome.
thanks.
Let's hand over to Irina next.
Hey, my name is Irina. I'm the CEO of Evil Martians. You can see our logo on many open source repos. So we actually do consulting. We do software consulting for startups. And the company has been around for 17 years. But since the beginning, we've always been open sourcing our tools. So when we do projects for clients, we think about making our work more productive, and then we build our own tools, and then we open source those tools. So this is the approach. And this is how, we became authors of Post CSS. Post CSS is super huge, larger than React by downloads on NPM. But of course, we call it something like, okay, maybe Post CSS has played its role in the history, but of course it was a crazy journey. Autoprefixer, we also do a lot in Ruby on Rails, and I'm the co-founder of AnyCable, where we have both open source and commercial version. So we do some of that. Image Proxy, AnyCable, they both have kind of open source and commercial, but of course the majority of open source is just various JavaScript and Ruby and Go open source tools that we use ourselves. How it got started, again, since the very beginning, and it all got started also in Ruby, but then grew into JavaScript and everything else. Thank you.
Love that we have two Ruby reps. Val, do you mind going next?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Valeri Karpov, or Val for short. I mostly work in the JavaScript community, specifically on Mongoose, which is open source ODM for Node.js and MongoDB primarily. I got started on that probably about 10 years ago when the previous maintainer didn't want to work on the project anymore, so I took over and have been working on it ever since. I maintain a wide variety of projects in the Node.js ecosystem, but Mongoose is by far the most popular and the most well-known. And my work on that is primarily driven by my consulting company, which is oddly enough structured a lot like Evil Martians. We do a lot of software consulting for small companies, and we open source a lot of our tools. All the work that we develop for our clients is done in Mongoose, so we eat our own dog food very thoroughly.
That's awesome. I didn't even register that they were similar setups right there. So that's cool. Tatu, would you like to close us out with intros, please?
Sure. So I'm Tatu Saloranta, probably better known as Cowtown Coder at GitHub and Twitter. And I'm working Java ecosystem and maintain about a dozen different libraries, but I'm best known for Java JSON library, which I authored a while ago and keep on maintaining. And how I got started, I started even before open source became the term, slightly before that, and this was work as research assistant. So I had some tools that were used for like writing papers or just like publishing source code, uploading that to be available. And when the OSS came about, then I think my first proper library is Java UUID generator from about 20 years ago, which I still maintain. And so it's been a long road and good to be there. So that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for your introductions. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be having this conversation with you. I'm going to get us going with our first question. So I want to reflect on a recent event, a pretty significant event, the XZ utils hack. We all have a lot of empathy and sympathy for Lassie, the maintainer for XZ utils. This could have happened to any of us, really, right? It could have any. There's no picking and choosing, right? So, but what I want to ask is, all of you maintain very well known, heavily relied upon packages in the JavaScript, Java, Ruby, and Python worlds. Let me start by asking, when you first saw what happened, how did it make you feel? What were some of your reactions and observations? Maybe Wesley, if we can start with you, and we can pass the mic from you to someone else.
Sure. I mean, in short, I guess, just sort of like that sucks, right? I mean, like you hope for the best. Like I think, what a lot of brought me to open source was that, it's kind of altruistic and there's a real community feel. And like most of the time, I think people are trying to do the right thing broadly, right? And so to have something like this happen where it puts you in a place of questioning, like, how much can I trust these people that I don't necessarily otherwise know? That, I'd like to think they mean the best, but do they really? And, how vulnerable would I be to something like this? Like, if someone came in like that, would I see it? Would I not see it? Would I be in the same situation? Would I fall to the same thing? Like, quite possibly, right? Like, so it's just, it's discouraging in some ways, I guess. It's certainly sad, and it's kind of scary too at the same time. Like, not only could it happen to me, but could it happen to other things that I rely on? And then, it might as well have happened to me because now it's in my stuff one way or the other, right? So yeah, it's spooky to say the least.
Irina?
Yeah, I felt a similar thing, of course, being scared, frankly, for the community, and also kind of worried about, anxious even about the kind of backlash, sort of the consequences that we're gonna have in the ecosystem, because you all know that maintainers already are under so much stress and burning out, and the question of how to make this work sustainable, not even a successful career, like life choice, but a barely sustainable life choice. This is the question. And now we have, in addition to this, this like added troubles of this whole system being insecure and not like the affecting the supply chain. And of course, this is scary, because if it means more pressure on the maintainers, I sometimes I just don't know where it's going, because maintainers cannot hold it all together without any support.
Yeah, same feelings, and after first thing being like could be me, it's also the whole thing about feeling inadequate when somebody reports things, and it was kind of scary that somebody managed to weaponize. And I don't know how intentional, how planned it was, but the whole thing is like everybody's probably familiar with like things being reported, and it's very tough to, because you don't feel that you're up to certain things, and then if somebody offers to help, how much do you kind of like vet those things? And it's such a relief when somebody does. So it's conflict emotions there, and it's kind of like, I guess it's bound to happen, but it is scary and disappointing, and in hindsight obvious. I guess those were the feelings that I had.
Yeah, similar feelings for me as well. I was a little spooked by by just the level of sophistication of the attack, and the attacker was a seemingly legitimate actor over the course of years. They were executing this plan with a very, very long timeline. So it kind of makes you wonder, like, would I have been able to catch something like this? Like, I don't know, if someone is willing to dedicate years of their time seeming like a legitimate actor and then turn tables when they get into kind of like a position of trust. That's a hard thing to deal with. But then, similar to what Irina said, I was also a little concerned about the potential backlash. Because I mean, when we all saw this, I'm sure we all started kind of thinking like, how much do we actually trust the other people that are committing to these to our open source projects? Like, how much do you trust someone who an anonymous picture creating a pull request on one of your GitHub repos, right? And I strongly believe that open source works better when anyone is allowed to contribute, or at least the bar to entry is sufficiently low. You have a laptop and an internet connection. It's about as low as you can make the barrier practically. And I think open source works better when we embrace that. But on the other hand, like the backlash from this issue, I worry that will kind of increase the barrier to entry to open source.
Thank you all for that. I fully agree that there is that biggest concern for me is how can we trust one another? In the world that we live in, where we all are, as we are in this conversation, in our boxes. How can we as humans inherently want to believe that everyone wants to do good, right? But it does challenge that thought process. But I'm going to turn it over to Amy for the next question.
Yes, absolutely. It's related also. So as Val mentioned, Lassie was a victim of what somebody might call social engineering that lasted not just a day, but years. And there were multiple sock puppet accounts associated. It's a pretty banana story. I just watched a video like recapping it an hour ago, and it's pretty wild. Can you tell me about a time where you felt either particularly supported or unsupported by the community of people who use your projects? Because some of the things that happened to Lassie, you've probably seen happen online. People can be a little mean. There was some bullying involved. So like, have you ever experienced that? Or it would also be nice if there were good stories you could tell of where you were actively supported by the community. And is this whole situation going to change the way that you might look at accepting help from maintainers as well? Anyone can chime in.
Well, I guess I can start. I don't feel that I've ever felt particularly unsupported, particularly because it's, there has been lots of like negative one-offs that somebody comes up strongly and, like how come this is still not fixed like 8 years after it's reported, or how do you have this stupid default setting, or whatever it is. But most of the time, it's individual. I've never had something pile up, in a sense. But I'm sure it happens, and it's kind of like easy things to snowball. But supported, I feel, and these are also like seemingly small things, at least for me, in the sense that then when there's some request or suggestion where I feel that I really don't know how to do this, and as long as I've updated a note saying that, this seems like a good idea, but I actually don't know even where to start. And then somebody steps up. It may be the original issue reporter, or it may be somebody else who following. Those are the ones that really stick in my mind, is that when community members step up and it's like, okay, I think I can help here. And these are the moments that really make it all worth it. And those, when I read this question, is what came to my mind is that there isn't always somebody who steps up, but it is much more often than you think, because sometimes you feel that you are the only person who can do this, and it's not absolutely not the case. There's community, even if it's not very tight-knit. So it's my experience here. It's like more positive than you might think, I guess.
Yeah, I think I'm in a similar boat. My overall experience has been positive. I mean, there have definitely been some people that have said some unpleasant things, and I've definitely felt pressure to release features or work on certain bug fixes because people have expressed their displeasure with the particular bug. But it's something that I try to not dwell on too much, because if you start dwelling on somebody saying something mean about you on the internet, well, you're never going to get anything done, right? But times I've felt supported. I mean, one time one particular story that I always remember very fondly was probably about first couple of years when I was working on Mongoose. I was working on kind of like a browser, like the ability to run Mongoose in the browser, and I ran into this blocking issue that I just could not find a way to fix, and I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And then I'm just some university student from Central Siberia just puts in a pull request that fixes my exact bug. I'm like, this is the best thing that's ever happened. This really made my day. So that's kind of where I see the delight of open source is the fact that anyone can contribute, and contributions can come from way out of left field and can really be something great.
I want to add something when I feel kind of this support in two ways. One is when I loved when somebody publishes any sort of content about using your product, about using your open source. It's just, it can be a big blog, it can be a small one, it can be in a different language, it can be German, Japanese, something, right? And it just is something that it doesn't happen too often, right? Not every day, but every time this happens, you kind of start believing in what you're doing, because you have somebody investing time and explaining to others why they chose you. So it's not only purely using your product kind of from the utilitarian sense, but also sharing about it with the community, feeling that this is worthy of sharing with others. So this is super supportive. I really love this. One example is Supabase chose Image Proxy, our open source image optimization tool, and they wrote an amazing blog post about this. Literally, probably our best piece of marketing, because it was really well written. So this was amazing. And also, the other side of this is when you have an in-person event and you got to meet people that maybe from GitHub, from issues, but maybe you contribute to their, maybe it's a Ruby event, maybe it's something else. But yeah, seeing those people in person, of course, it helps build trust. Of course, there's no way around this. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, I think similar to what other folks have said, a lot of that matches up with my experience. I think one of the challenges in a lot of cases for me is just the lack of signal, I guess. If you hear something from someone, it's probably negative, which tends to make it feel like you're not supported. I don't think that's really true, but the times when people reach out are when they need help and something's gone wrong. Usually, people don't file an issue on GitHub to say, thanks a lot, this is great. So yeah, I think some of the times I felt most supported, similar to what Irina was saying, I haven't done it in a while, but I used to go to a lot of conferences, especially Ruby conferences. And when you would meet people, they would say, the thing that you wrote has been really impactful and helpful to me. That was great, right? But then, yeah, on a day-to-day basis, it's much more likely that someone will come in and have the whole sort of I'm having a bad day because of your software, how dare you, right? And it's what do you mean, how dare I? I'm doing my best here. I didn't set out to make you have a bad day or something. I'm really sorry that that's what's happened, right? So yeah, I think that's a lot of it for me. And I think I don't know how to fix that. I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, there's just not the same warm, fuzzy feeling I get from seeing the number of downloads I have or something versus having that interaction with someone or seeing a blog post or something like Irina said, like those things where I, have more of a connection. One thing that has worked well for me, I guess, is like when people come in and report bugs, I do what I can to try to actually like coach them through solving that problem for themselves a lot of times. And that can give me a chance to have some of that, even though it's remote. And so that's one thing I guess I want to call out is like, I used to be like, I have to solve this problem. And I took, I didn't separate myself from the software very much, and that was not very sustainable. And so it felt very supported when I was able to make this transition to coaching other people through it, and that they were willing and interested and they would like to work with me on these problems. Like that helps me to have more of that feeling of support on a day-to-day basis. And I guess in terms of like trusting people, like I think, it's like we say with a lot of stuff, it's like trust but verify, right? Like I would prefer still to default towards trust, but like I still, when I work with these folks, I do very, careful, detailed review of the code. Does that mean I would necessarily catch something like a security issue because I'm not that much of a security expert in a lot of ways? Like, no, but I'm doing my best to try to cut that off at the pass, whatever. I don't know. I mean, I think what happened with XZ is just, I don't know that there's anything that you can do about that to some extent. It's just such a large, orchestrated ongoing effort. Like that's just such a hard thing to fight against. But
I have to say, I'm very happy that most of these were pleasant recollections. So that's really nice. And my takeaway from this is that people should post encouraging comments in addition to issues. So I also like your idea about coaching people through it, Wesley. That's maybe a way to get more maintainers, hopefully. So.
Yeah.
Amy, you stole the words out of my mouth. I was going to put out a call to all our attendees, while you're using open source software, take a minute out of your day and share a positive note of gratitude with the maintainers. But let me keep us going. So the next question that I have for you all is: have you ever experienced burnout while maintaining the projects that you have been maintaining? If you did experience burnout, did you ever think about quitting open source maintenance work? Or do you happen to know any other maintainers who found themselves in that situation? And how did things end up going? Maybe Tatu, we can start with you because we know some of the awesome work you have done already.
Sure. I haven't had like major burnout, but occasionally it does come that, feeling that is it worth it, and kind of like mini burnout feeling. And the usual thing is like what probably everybody does is like take a break, do something else for a while and kind of like energize. And then for me, what works is that oftentimes it is when like multiple things have been reported at the same time. And I remember when the polymorphic deserialization issue was active, like maybe 5 years ago, it seemed like things pile up. And so, go back and not work on the project for a couple of days and then come back and prioritize. Think of like things that are easy to address or something you get back to resolving and focusing just on something to untangle things and see where it goes. I don't know too many other open source authors that well, so I know I read about people having burnout and quitting, and I can relate to that, but I don't know anybody of the major libraries or frameworks, because people do move on, and I mostly know that many of the more famous authors like second generation or third, and I have observed some of the Jackson modules having like a Scala module is on its like third maintainer, I think, and so people moving on. But I think in most cases it is not necessarily burnout. It's more like your original need is gone, or you work for a company and it was part of that, and so on. So it's kind of like semi-natural moving on kind of thing. At least I hope it's not burnout, but that's my experience.
Irina, do you have any thoughts that come to your mind?
Yeah, definitely. It's a big problem. Of course, we are. It's something that I'm seeing people on our team burning out, of course, from time to time. And what's important is like first of all, there is this idea of being responsible for your own well-being in the whole kind of technological, industry, in the whole tech industry. We everyone is talented and passionate to jump into things, but then you need to think about your own boundaries to make sure you protect your own well-being. And that's a special skill, sort of, because it's not taught in school, right? So you need to consciously think about it, and think about it as your own responsibility. It's not a game, right? It's life. So you're responsible in the end of the day, and nobody else. So that's something we are maybe talking about sometimes internally. But what I'm also seeing is when it's kind of about, you could say, reward in open source, right? So sometimes you can get a lot of reward for some reason. Maybe your product is growing, your open source is growing like crazy. You get this whole, vibes of, oh my God, this is going. But inevitably, at some point, this stops, right? It cannot keep going forever. So this is a kind of crucial moment where you got to be able to sort of step back from that, disconnect a little bit from that game of stars and game of kind of growth, and think about your own life and what you want. And this is much bigger than any stars and star counts and stuff like that, right? So, it's all about not taking this too close to heart, always thinking about your life as a bigger thing, right?
I think we need to create a Game of Stars TV show. This sounds great.
That sounds like something that already exists. But Val, you had the mic. Any thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, similar to what Tatu said on the personal side. There's definitely days when I just want to disconnect and not work on open source anymore. But that feeling usually goes away if I take a day off to just relax and not worry about it. I would say the one thing that I kind of have to say is there are a few projects that I have maintained in the past where I have just kind of slowly but surely stopped maintaining them, and there I find it's more just there isn't as much reward, there isn't as much usage. I feel like the project has kind of done what I needed it to do. Maybe I no longer use the project, or maybe I still use the project, but it just isn't. But I don't see the benefit of improving it or continuing to actively maintain it. So there are a few projects like that, and I feel like that can kind of be in the vein of what happens when some maintainers burn out, is just don't feel like it's worth working on the project anymore because it's not fulfilling anymore, right? Or it's no longer useful to you in whatever circumstance you are at the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely does.
Yeah, if I can add maybe just one more thing is, I know we kind of shy away from this conversation often in open source, but what I'm trying to convince my friends who built a lot of open source, not just our team, is that they need to think about your kind of commercial reward and commercial side of things as well. So if you're completely ignoring it, it kind of at some point becomes a problem, because we are human beings in economy. We need to sustain our lives and our families at some point. And people, it should be fine that, okay, you kind of use it to help you find a job, or you consult. Many people consult, right? Users of their open source. And this is, I think, what's missing, and what the community could be doing better is supporting maintainers in finding those commercial opportunities in their core field of expertise. That's what I'm kind of thinking about, because if they're able to find commercial opportunities doing something that they're already experts at and can sort of signal because of their work in open source, and then use their open source doing those commercial projects. This is beneficial for all, if you think about this, because this kind of makes this open source also commercially meaningful for the person. But it can be, of course, there are many different options, but what I'm saying is sometimes we just feel we cannot discuss this, or we feel our work in open source has to be completely, I don't know, you have to only kind of donate without thinking of any reward, and this is not sustainable, right? So this is important.
It's actually interesting. Like I was about to say something different, but it ties in nicely. Is that how much of like your involvement also is social? You know, like at least for most libraries, I may have had original reason to develop or use it, but long after that, you know, there hasn't been much that I needed personally. But it's more like when somebody's using a library, it seems to me that if nobody's using it, seemingly there's not much motivation. But when there are many users, you feel like it's part of your social interaction in a way. And it goes like almost like addiction, I guess, in a positive sense. You know, you get kind of like it's or habit forming is better word. You know, you get good or bad habits, and it continues like that and feeds itself. And I think that's also part of the reason why maybe like monetary parties, like economists, you know, point out that you never tip on like Thanksgiving dinner. And why is that? I mean, it's a good meal. Why wouldn't you give money? And it's totally inappropriate to do that because it's social context and it's not like commercial relationship. And it's difficult to kind of like combine those two. So that may be one of the things that may make it more difficult. It should be like some ways that it shouldn't be the case that, you know, just because you do commercial things, it would negate other things that are non-commercial. But I think there's kind of like this friction that's people don't think about that, and it's not obvious until you start thinking about that, maybe.
I am a big fan of open source projects thinking more about how they monetize. And I don't necessarily think that has to take away from kind of like the open and the kind of like friendly social aspect of it, because again, there's countless ways to monetize a project, right? You don't necessarily have to switch to charging your users. You don't even have to switch necessarily to like a freemium model, right?
Yeah, I didn't imply that that's
advertising. There's paid content. There's countless avenues for it. And yeah, I kind of agree with Irina in the sense that I think more open source maintainers should think more about how to monetize their projects, simply because until we get to a stage as a society where people can live entirely for free on universal basic income, which may happen at some point, may not, who knows. We all need to find a way to make money to support ourselves and our families. So if it's not via your open source project, then you need to work on something else, and then your work on the open source project comes out of your free time, basically. And I'm very fortunate that I can make decent income working on my open source projects. But I know that if I had like a full-time job and my open source projects didn't pay anything, and I had to choose between, do I work on this open source project that's sometimes kind of thankless and people are mean to me on the internet about it, or do I go spend time with my kids? You know, do I tell my kids, no, I can't, Daddy can't play with you. Daddy's got to help this unappreciative person. That wouldn't feel great. That would be tough.
Yeah, I mean, I can chime in a little bit, kind of relating to one of my previous answers, I guess. Like, I wouldn't say that I've experienced burnout, but I would say it was a near miss probably. Earlier in my career, especially like, this 15-year ago period that I was talking about when I got started on a lot of this stuff. I had just come out of being at a startup where I was working probably 70-ish hours a week and came into a new job where I wasn't doing that anymore, but old habits are hard to kick. And I ended up kind of filling in that extra 30 hours I now magically had with a lot of open source work, among other things. And, I was excited to do it for some amount of time, but as you all probably realize and imagine, not super sustainable. And so like at some point it became clear that something had to give, basically, like that wasn't going to work. And, one of the ways that could have played out certainly would be to just walk away. Right. That's not how it did play out for me. It took a lot of, I guess, soul searching, one might say, or something. like to try to figure out how to proceed in a way that was going to work better. And like this notion of sort of like coaching and doing other things around it, kind of like focusing on more of the community aspects and a little bit less on the technical aspects, gave me, in my situation at least, the space to make that work better, right? So it wasn't as much like somebody reported a bug, oh my goodness, I need to drop everything and fix this bug right away because otherwise this will reflect poorly on me and I feel like I have something to prove, to more of a, this is something, we're all in this together. So if something's broken, like let's figure out how as a community we can work on fixing this and then, move forward in that way. And it was an awkward, hard transition, but yeah, I think it worked out well enough. And, I think in the end it was better for it. And now I don't work 70 hours a week on that and open source and whatever else. But, I do have the tensions now. I have 2 young kids and, I have a full-time job that mostly is not this open source project, right? So like, I still have to find ways to fit that in somewhere. But thankfully, burnout wasn't where I ended up in it. But, there, but the grace of God go I, or, whatever the statement is, right? Like it felt like it wasn't that hard to imagine that that's the place I could have ended up if things didn't quite play out the way that they did, if I didn't have some of the mentors that I had at the right times. And I wasn't at some of the Ruby conferences where I saw some of these people and saw that, there were people that could and would support me if I just would ask them, basically, right? Like, so, yeah.
Well, thank you all. I think a couple of the ideas that you all shared, which relate to sort of generating income based on the work, the incredibly valuable work you're doing is important. And we had a couple questions built in to our track today that talk about the fair return on the effort that you all are putting in keeping this internet of ours, up and running. So I'm actually going to skip ahead to our last question, simply because in the interest of time. So our co-founder, Luis Villa, is going to be doing a talk on the day of Upstream, where he's going to share statistics coming out of a new study from the Digital Forensics Research Lab at the Atlantic Council. They published a study that came to the conclusion that paying maintainers could have a positive impact on security outcomes. We thought that this was a really amazing statistic and observation to see, because there hasn't been to date too much sophisticated research outside of some of the survey and research that Tidelift has undertaken to make the connection of, justly paying maintainers for the work that they're doing in building this amazing software that the world uses and in maintaining that software, right? So this was a completely data-driven study. They did not talk to any maintainers. So we'd like to get your takes, and you have shared some of those takes already. But for those of you who are earning money for your work, whether it be from Tidelift or from other sources, are you able to invest more time in the security of your projects than you were before you were getting paid? And how should companies think about their investment in your work, especially as enterprise organizations? They have significant investments in security teams, but they can't really impact the security of your open source projects, right? So how can enterprise organizations think about investing into the security of the projects that you all are maintaining? Maybe we start with you, Irina, on this one.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, first of all, I really appreciate the work Tidelift is doing, and what I like about it is I essentially perceive it as exactly this, as enterprise companies paying to maintainers to keep security at a certain level, let's say, and to improve security of the open source. And what it actually means two things. First of all, yeah, you have some resources you can use, a few days, for example, something like that, just for that. Just on that, but then also it gives you information that, hey, there are big companies out there and they care and they want to pay you specifically for this, for with security in mind. It's kind of not just donation, because people do donations for different reasons, even to kind of look good. You never know why a person or organization made a donation, really. And the bigger the company, the less you know about their motives. But when like Tidelift is kind of super clear use case, sort of, because it's kind of specifically focused on security, and big companies are paying for this. So the only thing that is, I'd say, missing is I think we still lack data. So the more information we could get about big companies and any kind of companies using our open source, the better, actually, because if you think about it for a second, how much information any SaaS product gets from its users, even people not using it really or using it occasionally, and how much kind of authors of open source know about people using their open source. Literally nothing. So Tidelift serves as this only signal that tells you, okay, there are big companies out there, they care, sort of. Just as this is a lot, but is it enough?
Thank you. Wesley, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think, riffing on some of those things, I think, like I said before, a lot of times the strongest signals you see aren't necessarily super positive ones. And this feels like a nice positive one. Like, if somebody is putting money towards this, they must care, they must be using it. Like, otherwise it can be, the other signals don't seem as clear or strong. So that can be very nice. And, I think similar to what Tatu was saying about remaining engaged with things, like, it's a lot easier to keep maintaining and working on something if it's clear that people actually care, right? As it becomes less clear that that's true, it's a lot easier to feel burned out or apathetic or just not have the energy or focus or whatever to keep moving on a project, especially if it's not one that you have that much of a particular need for anymore. That being said, though, I feel like there are some orthogonal things. Like, for me, a lot of times, like, why I wouldn't do better security things are, it's like because I don't know better or because it's just too damn hard, right? And so one of the things that was really valuable to me coming into the Tidelift stuff was it did a good job of laying out a bunch of security best practices, some of which I'd never really given that much serious consideration to just because it had never come up. And being able to just go through some of the materials and say, oh, actually, like, clearly documenting how many versions back I would actually patch or not. Like, that seems like a good idea. And nobody had ever asked before. I'd never really thought about it. And this lays out how I might even do that, right? So, like, there are some education aspects in addition to just the money. Like, the money helps keep me engaged, but then, like, what do I do with it? What do I do with that time that I have or whatever? So those parts I think were really helpful. Yeah, there was something else. It eludes me now. Maybe it will come back to me though. So if somebody else wants to chime in.
Yeah, so in general, I believe that projects where the maintainers derive some income related to the project are probably going to be more actively maintained. I think that's a reasonable conclusion to draw. Going back to the XZ hack, I mean, I know a lot of people think that, okay, if Lassie had been getting paid, this attack might not have happened. But one point, related point that I've been thinking about recently was like, if the maintainer that turned out to be malicious that Lassie had nominated, if he or she had been getting paid, would they have gone through with the hack? Because I think like monetized open source can kind of like cut both ways, where you can both reward good actors but also penalize bad actors. So if you find yourself trying to attack an open source project and all of a sudden you're a maintainer and hey, you derive some income from it, like, hey, it's a couple $100s a month, maybe not not going to be buying a mega yacht, but when you start thinking like, is it worth it to go through with this hack that will get rid of my income stream and not really have much likelihood of financial upside? Maybe, I don't know, maybe if they had like gotten some root access to a bank somewhere, they might have been able to do something with it. But the likelihood is the financial impact probably wasn't huge for this attack, and the attacker probably didn't make a boatload of money off of it. So it kind of makes you think like both like rewarding maintainers that maintain their projects well, while also creating a financial incentive for people not to go rogue and do something like this could be beneficial.
Yeah, I think one thing about the getting more money is that it's clearly for most maintainers, more resources they got, more time they have to do work on things, and they tend to do things that are important. I think like something that I think Luis pointed out and some other folks, which most people don't acknowledge, is that there are two things that are most, the best about support that I think that are important. One is that the money is no strings attached. It shouldn't be something that here's $500 for fixing a bug, because that has been proven to be very, it seems sensible on surface, but it doesn't work for long term. And second, even more important part is the sustainability. So getting something for a monthly basis for a longer period of time allows you to much more freely do things that you care about, and presumably you care about things that matter. And that's then combination that you have this income and also like input that these security aspects are important, useful, and there's knowledge to kind of share. So I think it's kind of like things that are related but not necessarily bundled. So it's not that here is $1,000 per month, but only if you focus on security aspects. And I think that it may seem counterproductive, but trying to do that is probably not a good idea. So it is to raise the importance, and because open source projects tend to work on things that people request, and it's a combination of authors, kind of like personal views and preferences, and then community input and so on. So Tidelift does great here. So it is substantial, it's sustainable, and it kind of guides things that could be done, but it doesn't force. So I think that's kind of like the recipe for success for everybody. And I don't think people actually know, like outside of Tidelift, not necessarily recognize this, and it seems to be kind of like not widely understood. So I like when it's being brought up, here are reasons why this works better. So thank you.
Thank you. And Tatu, you are an outstanding example of some of the security work that you took on to improve your package and going beyond the call and implementing fixes and such and jackson-databind. So thank you for that. But Amy, I'll give it over to you.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us today. It's been really, really fabulous. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And it's been an absolute delight to hear directly from all of you. We appreciate you all and everything you do to keep the world running, because that's what you do. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Have a great day.